Chattanooga and in Tennessee, but leaving room for you, my listener, you with the open collar or the regular tie, just tune in for a few minutes here to the David Tulis program at Nooga Radio, and you will be ahead of the curve. You will have that progressive, optimistic, cheerful view that I have about the future, which comes even though I have an extraordinarily bleak assessment, say, of city council and the Tennessee General Assembly and the governor and his enforcement mechanisms enforcing commercial economy and commercial government upon the people. I have a great and positive view of the future, looking even at disaster with a great deal of optimism. And disaster, I think, is what's ahead. There is $127 trillion in federal obligations that the Congress can't make. It has $19 trillion in debt. It is a fragile system. It is fault intolerant. There's a high degree of centralization, and it cannot do anything but continue to centralize, continue to pile on other fixes, other haphazard fixes on a system, more rules, more regulations on a system that can't possibly work and is destined to collapse into a heap. Centralization having its peak in the 1960s, the state itself beginning a decline, according to Martin Van Creveld in his book, The Rise and Decline of the State, in 1945 with the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the state having lost its main reason, which is war. War is now much different than it was with the nuclear era beginning, and the state is losing its purpose and its cause. What about us here in Chattanooga? These all things may sound great and grand and maybe terrifying, but what about us here in the city of Chattanooga? Can we become independent? Can we become freer? Can we become somehow greater than we are? These are questions that I like to ask to people such as Dave Crockett, probably the city's most important statesman, ran for mayor. He was on the city council in the 1980s and early 90s and helped bring about a transformation of the city to the environmental city. That's a lot of credit goes to him, acting as it were as an executive, though he was only a legislator on the council, and he's kind of in some areas of endeavor a minister without portfolio, thinking here about the rail project that he is fulminating over, trying to lobby for, trying to raise a little bit of money for, so that he might have some influence on a pending decision about the route of a proposed high-speed magnetic levitation rail. Now, Dave, I want to ask you, my listener wants to know about the future of Chattanooga and trends in the economy that either speak well for our situation or badly. Centralization is ending, and we see it all around us in, say, Uber, the Airbnb story that we've covered here is a picture of that trend. Breaking up of centralized systems. National governments are the key players and the worst offenders against the free market and against prosperity. What do you see ahead for Chattanooga? Can we become, the rail story aside, if that's possible, the rail story aside, can we become over time a greater economic force, a freer place in Chattanooga? What's your take?
I think the rail facilitates that, but I'm going to move very quickly past that. Think about it right now. Hilton hotels worldwide, their market value, it is less than a company that does not own any property. And that's Airbnb, which is valued at $40 billion, and one of the largest hotel property people, but they don't own any property. And think about the largest taxi company in the world that doesn't own a car, Uber, which is a huge change. Or think about what Jim Clifton of Gallup says in the Coming Jobs War, and about the changes about how we compete. In the old days of going out and putting up mega bucks to get a Volkswagen property, a Volkswagen located in Chattanooga, those days are over, of piling up cash to get an industrial company to come locate here, because they can quickly make a decision to go somewhere else. They're not anchored here. So the most important thing you can do is think way out of the box about how you can follow a model that is one that we see every day with the internet. I was with IBM, and not a mainframe model of one large centralized thing talking to a lot of dumb things, but a highly distributed and connected connection of smart things. And that's the model for the economy of the future. If you think about that, then food will be raised closer to where it's consumed. Energy will be produced closer to where it is consumed. And the energy markets, everybody's, making a case for nuclear or coal mines or whatever. That Chattanooga used to be the saddle capital of the world. We had large tanneries. We made more saddles than any place in Texas. Now, we could make a big deal about trying to restore the saddle business in Chattanooga, but with all these cars on the road, I don't think it's going to happen. You have to look forward to breaking the entire notion of what a hotel chain is, a taxi chain is, and what a local economy is. We will generate energy off the top of our houses and in small increments where it is consumed. You will have, you can't make a local neighborhood nuclear energy plant. I mean, they just don't come.
Are you sure?
Well, maybe we try. Somebody will try, I'm sure. But if you can generate electricity where you live as a consumer or where your shop is, like a Home Depot, and you can generate your electricity there, that's called a prosumer, where you produce and consume at the same place. That's the model of the future. It's also one that is more reliable. You can't knock the internet down, but you can go out and knock down a power plant. A power plant can go offline and you're in trouble.
You're suggesting, Dave, that if these many services can be decentralized, so can manufacturing, so can the making of parts, for example, with 3D printing.
3D printing.
How can my listener be involved in the productive economy in manufacturing? How theoretically could that be, let's say, in the next 10 years?
In the next 10 years, it's going to change pretty quickly. If you listen to Elon Musk, who is the founder of Tesla and the largest manufacturing center in the country now, who's making solar shingles for houses, and he's attempting to do it at a cost level with existing roofing that will have a lifetime guarantee and will produce energy, looks just like the shingles on your roof, will produce energy, and ultimately every house becomes an energy exporter back to the grid. You don't want to go off the grid unless you're, want to, go contemplate life in some distant place. That's fine. But locally in cities, you want to be on the grid so you can feed that power back and sell it. And that's the highly distributed, connected model. What he says, and what this week in Aspen, a lot of smart people out there are sitting down and gazing at their navels and trying to predict the future. But one of the futures that's being predicted by everybody, including large corporate CEOs from GE and other companies, IBM, et cetera, is that the workforce is going to change so fast that we're going to hit a new gear. And in Star Wars jargon, we're going to go to warp speed in the next decade. And things like truck drivers' jobs could be changing because trucks can be operated in the future, will be operated without a driver, and can be operated safely, and that will change what people do. That will change what people do in factories with the automation and using robots and in service industries. That now you go into McDonald's, it's not going to look the same in 20 years. They think that 40% of the people in this country, that their jobs could be in transition. Some of them even have suggested that we have a national wage for everybody because so many people will be thrown out of work. I don't support that. I think that you prepare for it. And because if you had a national wage, you would absolutely stymie, I believe, entrepreneurship and incentive and motivation. Those jobs can be replaced at a local level. Imagine that everything you do, every problem has another side of the coin. If it's a stormwater problem in Chattanooga, let's address it as an opportunity. What I don't like, I'll answer to if somebody says, are you a localist or a regionalist or an urbanist or an environmentalist or a economist or a capitalist or whatever, I'll answer to whatever you want to call me. But the only is that I really like to be is called an opportunist. An opportunist looks at any situation and looks strictly at the opportunity. They don't look at it philosophically. They don't look at it whether they like it or not. They look at it dispassionately and opportunistically.
And
what
often
can we make out of
you're
this?
pointing out that people like that see a company in distress. They see a company in the red. People are leaving. The product has got some problems, and they say, I'm going to buy that company at the bottom because it's an opportunity for me to repair it and fix it.
Absolutely. Or how do we reorient an economy? Well, let's just take a simple thing that's really easy to understand. We have a stormwater problem. That's not a problem. That's an opportunity. Every city in the country has that problem. Nashville's going to spend $1 billion on a consent decree. So is Memphis. So is it Birmingham. Knoxville's going to spend $600 million. Chattanooga we got by with the low price of $200 million. The taxpayers have to pay for that, by the way. And so, woe is me. Let's scream about it and say it's awful. It's awful. Gene Roberts was a mayor here one time, and he said that, and he also was a former writer for the Chattanooga Free Press.
Times.
Was he Times? Okay. But he said the guy that sold the papers downtown right across from the Reed House used to sit there every Saturday night and Sunday morning with a big stack of papers. And he had the same thing to say every day. Ain't it awful? Ain't it awful? Read all about it. Ain't it awful? And he said that every Saturday and Sunday morning. Ain't it awful? Read all about it. Well, we can all sit around and wish we were the saddle capital of the world again, or that we can restore the 1950s, the good old 1950s, which weren't so good in Chattanooga.
Well, Dave, it sounds like you're complaining about the problem of over-organization and the remedy for it. We live in a culture that's highly centralized. It's highly over-organized. We have a command culture in national government and in the national economy.
You want an innovative culture. You want a culture that says to be an entrepreneur. By the way, the most successful entrepreneur in America is what? 30 years old with a degree in computer science sitting down in our innovation district? No, it is a 51-year-old woman who has raised her kids. And that is by Inc. magazine. That is the highest percentage of success entrepreneur in America today. Every single person in Chattanooga can be an innovator and an entrepreneur. We're building rain gardens. When I grew up, I don't remember seeing grown men riding around with $25,000 worth of lawnmowers in the fancy lawnmowers in a trailer with a brand new truck. I don't remember that. The reason that I am here is that to take care of your lawn, people had children. And so I was the designated lawn cutter and cut everybody else's yard as I could for $5 or $10. That's not true anymore. So all of a sudden there's a business in mowing lawns. We don't have a landscaping industry in Chattanooga to speak of.
Well, we do actually, but go ahead.
Well, we don't have a very robust one. But what if we all learned how to do a rain garden and the city started looking, instead of digging big holes in the ground that are big as a football field to hold overflow water, that we started adopting ways of naturally and filtering that water back into the water table, keeping it from stormwater running off, keeping it out of our sewers. And we started doing that. And we became a center of knowledge on that. Many other cities have done that. And anybody who could figure out a way to do that that was unique, you automatically have a marketplace of about 20,000 cities in America. If it works in your neighborhood, chances are it could work in 1 million neighborhoods or some portion of them.
Dave, let's pull back a little bit and take our drone high above the city so we can see the whole thing. What is the prospect of a stronger city of Chattanooga in this diversified economy, the digital economy, where there is, you must say, we're collapsing from over-organization, so we have becoming disorganization, becoming decentralization. How is my listener going to benefit in that era? Is it dangerous or is it exciting?
If you want to get a job and go work in a plant and stay there all your life and had good health care and then have a retirement like you did for DuPont in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, even into the 80s, then if that's your dream, it is a dream. It's not going to happen. That economy is gone, and it's not coming back. We can want it to come back, but it's not coming back. I worked for IBM, and I worked at a time when people joined a big company, and they stayed there for 25 or 30 years and got their health and everything else. Those days are gone.
What is my listener supposed to do regarding himself? How should he be thinking? What should he be reading, Dave Crockett?
What he should be doing is you have to do lifelong learning, number one. Number two, you have to be an entrepreneur. You have to be an entrepreneur, no matter what stage of life you're in. You don't have to have a degree in computers. You don't have to have be 30 years old and sitting downtown Chattanooga to be an entrepreneur. That could be and we could have a focus in Chattanooga, which we wanted to do, about being a place of education for how things will change from plumbing to building materials to how you make carpet. We have become that place. We don't make carpet like we did years ago. In the early 90s, we brought people here, Bill McDonough and Michael Brungard, a German chemist. And they worked with carpet companies, and everybody laughed about it at first. And, this is bow tie twits is what they call these guys. Bow tie twits talking about cradle to cradle, full life cycle. Well, all of a sudden, these guys, not because of regulation, the formaldehyde is out of the carpet that used to burn your eyes when you got new carpet. The plasticizers are coming out. The whole formulation of the carpet has changed so that it is not 5 billion tons of it, in the pounds, 5 billion pounds of it in the landfill every year. It is designed to come back and not become a park bench, which was the first iteration of recycling material back into something. But it is now going back into the product. And the leading cradle-to-cradle design part of with the crucible of that was Dalton, Georgia, and Chattanooga, Tennessee. Every product will be made differently. Every product will be made without the toxins and carcinogens and endocrine disruptors, and it'll be made to be reused as part of a new product. Now, when you have that much change, that means that anybody sitting in Chattanooga has the ability to figure that out. If you start thinking about that total life cycle design for every single thing we do, then everybody in Chattanooga is an entrepreneur. This is not regulation. This is innovation. If you want to be driven by regulation, you're probably going to be out of business because that is focused on the minimum. Did you commit a felony on the way down here to the radio station, David? No. Well, you don't get a blue ribbon for that. That is the basic minimum, that you don't do things like that. Innovation is the other side. It is not driven by regulations at all. It's driven by doing something better and doing something to make money.
Dave Crockett, thanks for joining us. Dave Crockett is a former candidate for mayor and a former city councilman, helped bring about the environmental city. And we're talking today about the future of Chattanooga, the idea of an independent city-state, becoming a regional player, drawing people here, drawing talent here, being part of a diversified, decentralized future economy, digital economy. This is David Tulis, and thank you for giving us a minute of your time here at Nooga Radio. Now, I've got some important announcements.
Nooga Radio, AM 1240, 92.7 FM.
Are you looking